This whole video started in 2011. No, actually, here is 23-year-old me holding my very own copy of East West Hollywood Strings in my home studio in my parents' apartment. At this point of my career, I've been producing Friends and doing random gigs for about 8 years, and I just landed my very first real TV show score. I actually spent all of that score's budget, actually a little more than that, on buying every plugin or library I might need to make this show sound the best ever. That list, amongst other things, included Omnisphere, Trillion, Superior Drummer 2, and what would end up being my most used string library to date. I know that this might sound controversial, but in my opinion, to this day, Hollywood Strings is one of, if not the best string library ever created. At the time of its release, January of 2010, Hollywood Strings was miles ahead of the game. It was a string library so realistic and so feature-packed that it was unlike anything we've seen before from any other company, kind of like what the iPhone was for smartphones when it just came out, only 3 years prior. See, at the time, Spitfire Audio was only 3 years old with no orchestral libraries yet, just percussion. Albion 1 wouldn't be released for another year. Side note, I still use Albion 1 to this day, but as an add-on color, not as my main library. So, if you wanted to get a big orchestral string library that sounds like the movies, back then your options were, in large, Miroslav Philharmonic, LA Scoring Strings, which were doing amazing things, but not really comparable to Hollywood Strings if you wanted to get that big Hollywood sound. VSL, which I didn't really get into, so it's hard for me to say anything good or bad about, but looking at old demos, it really sounds good if a little key switch depended. And lastly, you had the old East-West Quantum Leap Symphonic Orchestra Platinum. Really rolls off the tongue. But that library was released in 2003. That's the same year Windows XP was released. SanDisk introduced the mini SD to the world, not the micro SD that you put into your Nintendo Switch. No, the middle child everyone forgot about. And MySpace was born only 1 year before Facebook was launched. My point is, East West had a lot of time to learn and improve their sampling and coding abilities, especially since they just ported all of their libraries from Native Instruments Contact 4 to their own new player engine, Play. This presented multiple advantages over Contact, like blocking illegal downloads of their libraries, but most importantly, custom library scripting. They were in complete control over their product and how it behaves. And behaved well, it did. The result was, and largely still is, an intuitive, responsive, and very convincing sounding strings. And versatile. East West sampled and implemented pretty much every and any articulation to cover 99% of your composing needs, from playable run scripts to multiple legato modes such as bow change, portamento, slurred, to harmonics, trills, trems, and more. Okay, enough history lesson. Now that you know my relationship with Hollywood Strings 1, let's jump to current day. Hollywood Strings is announced and released, I get super excited, and even though the demo kinda sucks, I get a temporary subscription to try it out, and This is not the sequel this library deserves. This library is not good. And despite Nick's post on the VI Control forum, you can pause to read, this library does not blow me away, and the legatos are not even close to Hollywood Strings 1. So the original plan was to give this library a bad review and compare it to what now is a 14-year-old library and see how it blows it out of the water. But it got me thinking, when was the last time any library blew me away like Hollywood Strings 1 did? I'm not saying that there aren't any good libraries out there and that everything that came out in the last 14 years is total garbage. Cinematic Studio Strings are a monster and I'm using them heavily. LA Scoring Strings 2 sounds beautiful, and other libraries like Nashville Scoring Strings and Performance Samples are doing amazing things. The thing is, it seems like almost every month we have a new string library, and even more if you account for other sections of the orchestra. And every library is one that you must own for the most realistic and emotional and driving sounds that will take your scores to the next level. But I don't know about you, but after buying dozens of string libraries, I tend to go with 3 libraries as my main sound, and then an extra 2 or maybe 3 as an extra flavors if the scene calls for it. Yes, there is the occasional special case that requires something different, but these are few and relatively rare, and honestly, I would probably be better off recording someone, or even, recording myself on my $100 violin, which I honestly really can't play. But I digress. So how come a big company like East West announced a sequel to such a big title like Hollywood Strings, and the result is that bad? Well, after giving it some thought, I pretty much narrowed it down to money. I know, shocker, but bear with me. We are in an oversaturated market with big companies like East West and Spitfire Audio, Native Instruments, Cinesamples, ADO, Audio Imperia, and more competing for your money. The battle for best is gone. This is a popularity contest whether you like it or not. We're essentially in the Apple era of orchestral libraries, since so many smaller companies can create unbelievable libraries these days with just Kontakt and fancy scripting. The competition for best sounding is irrelevant, and in order to win a spot in your orchestral template, companies resort to other means of attention. Budgets are getting smaller and smaller, competitions is getting fierce with new kids on the block doing unbelievable things in a fraction of the time it would take you to do it, while job requirements climb higher and higher and deadlines are getting tighter and tighter. So in order to combat composers having less money, thus buying less libraries, companies bundle everything together to create a subscription model, like Native Instruments and their complete bundles with somewhat affordable upgrades each year. East West have their Composer Club subscription that gives you access to all of their libraries and often even early access to new libraries. And Cinesamples just started Museo. In that case, as long as those companies pump up enough libraries to make it worth your money, you'll keep giving them your money, or at least that's the idea. And while it is seemingly a good thing for the end user, what do I care? I spend the same amount of money I would pay for one library a year and get all of them. If music subscription might give us any insight to what this business model can do for an industry, I can't imagine it working any better for companies that need to spend thousands of dollars recording an entire orchestra in a lucrative studio and then pay a team of programmers to spend months making sense of all these samples to compete for a fraction of the composer industry. My point is, it seems like companies need to offer you more libraries, not better libraries. So it makes sense to make a library that is good enough and make sure that you're getting your money's worth with more releases per year so you don't cancel your subscription. Another way to get you to buy a library is by adding a thing that hooks you in. Most commonly, a feature artist like Spitfire Audio's Hans Zimmer strings, which I bought, Cinesample's Tina Guo's cello, which I also bought, or recording it in a legendary studio like Air Studios or Abbey Road, all the way to Native Instruments sampling a one-of-a-kind 300-year-old violin made by Stradivari himself from a wood taken from the Garden of Eden, recorded with 32 microphones. Other ways may include creating unique features like timed swells or smart divisi, or unique playing styles or uncommon ensembles like fewer players or a 100-piece string section. All of these result in a very special sounding library, and as I mentioned, I personally bought some of those. However, from experience, with the exception of maybe Tina Guo's cellos, which is really useful and cool, most of these libraries are very niche. And for the majority of them, they serve a very specific usage and get about 10% usage in my composing toolshed. Now, as creatives, we're all different, and your music style might call for a different set of tools and libraries than mine, and you might completely disagree with everything that I'm saying in this video. But to me, and I'm saying this as an impulse buyer that still gets excited every time Spitfire announces their biggest release yet, and falls into every trap like having the name of a composer that I love in the title of a product, it feels like orchestral libraries pretty much plateaued in the past few years. They're great, but they're equally great. And while some companies still make strides to make actual leaps in orchestral mockups to stay in the peak above all, others resorted to just trying to get your attention and money. Personally, and this is a conversation that I had with a friend not long ago, and we agreed that you'd probably be better off taking this $300 or $400 you would spend on a library and putting it into recording even a single session player in your bedroom and seeing your vision through, instead of gambling that this next library will give you that unique sound that you're looking for. That same library that thousands of other composers can also get. No library can beat a live player, and even a shitty performance of you botching the cello will have more life in it than any other library on your computer. Now, it's not all bad, and truth be told, current libraries do sound a lot better than they might have 10 or even 5 years ago, but I do wish to see some change in the industry. For one, the ability to try the library before I buy it. No, not like that. But I do wish that I could somehow try a library before spending sometimes upwards of $500 on a non-refundable product, especially if I end up not liking it. And I do see the problem with letting users try it, but still, years ago, Best Service tried to do an online demo where you could reserve a time slot for an online session on a remote computer where you got access to all of their libraries and you can play with them to your heart's content while a myriad of sounds of birds made sure that you're not just resampling your demo session. Now, this was way too early for its time and the lag and the latency was abysmal, and I tried 2 or 3 libraries before I got just too frustrated and just dropped it. But it's a start. I would even like to give props to East West for having the option to subscribe for just 1 month for $30, and then you get access to everything. I do find myself using it way more than I thought I would, since I don't like subscriptions, so I don't do them, but I still want to see if I like the library before I commit and buy it. Another notable example is Orchestral tools, where they let you buy individual patches from a library. No, it's not a trial or a subscription, but you'll be surprised. Usually, a single patch is a really good indication if a library is right for you or not. And other times, that one patch is really all you need. And in my case, that one patch pushed me over the edge to buy the whole library. That's why I no longer accept the excuse that it's really hard to create a good, realistic sounding library. We know that, and yet we have amazing, realistic sounding libraries. I'm just noticing that as time goes by, I feel less excited every time a company announces their new product and feel less and less compelled buying new libraries. And while pretty demos and fancy videos are impressive, at the end of the day, it's up to the composer to decide if a product is good or useful, or not. And the composer community is very much alive with websites like VI Control or Gearspace or Facebook groups like Perspective. It's hard to bullshit your way out of a bad product. So please, if someone from a company that makes libraries, which, who am I kidding? No one from these companies is going to watch this, but on the off chance, we can tell when a product is great and when it's not. Saying that it's great in the walkthrough video does not make it great. So take your time and release something that makes me feel good about spending my money. Make a product that will make my friends go, ooh, what's that library? Something that I can recommend to all of my friends and colleagues, even 14 years later. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Do you agree with anything that I said? What's your go-to library? And what is a recent library that you got that was actually amazing? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know if you still want me to make a review for Hollywood Strings 2. I have a lot of thoughts on this one. If you like this video, give it a like, consider subscribing for more music and composing talk, and of course, stay creative, stay awesome. I'll see you in the next one.